everybody, this is Tony.
And this is Paul. We're coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast, where we discuss the ongoing lives and issues of people with developmental disabilities to spark positive change in the field.
And we have a lot of fun doing it.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast. Thank you for tuning back in. Today, we have special guest Patricia Pat Stevens. How are you doing this wonderful morning?
I'm fine. How are you today?
Doing great. And, we're very excited to have you on the show. You're a veteran of the DD field. You've been through the paces, and you also have some other stuff that Tony's really interested in talking about. So,
yes.
First question, always, how did you get started in the DD field?
Well, I have a sister that has a developmental disability, and I'm originally from outside of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. So that's actually how I kind of got into the field itself, brought in by birth, more or less. So, and we have we're very tight-knit brothers and sisters. And so, she was raised just like we were. She has her own community. She takes care of all her business pretty much. And, she just has had a lot of independence in her life because we have given her that as a freedom. So that's how I got in the field. But I actually started off, I have a business degree, which is interesting. But I used to work for the Adult Services Center at Hill under the county board, but I bought 8 years of mental health experience before I actually came there, and then managed doing placement for people with mental health issues, did that, and then I was a procurement specialist and a placement person for the county board, and then had different promotions. So it's been a total of about 24 years. It's been very nice. I enjoy what I'm doing.
Wow, that is impressive. Yeah, that's 24 years is a while. I think in 24 years, I've probably had like 6 different jobs or something. And I've only been working for like 10 of them. So, but it's interesting you bring up mental health. That's a topic that gets a lot of play nowadays. I mean, people are talking about that. I feel like that's a newer thing because that was when I was growing up in like the 90s and early 2000s when I was a kid. I don't know if it wasn't because I wasn't paying attention to these bigger topics or what, but I don't remember hearing this much about mental health. So how have you seen mental health like topics evolve over time since you kind of that's where you got your start? Because nowadays it's such a talked about thing, like how important it is for everybody. And over the last 2 years, obviously it's a hugely important topic. So what are some things that you've seen evolve and maybe some good tips for people on how to keep mentally healthy through basically the stuff we've all been dealing with?
Yeah.
I think years ago, people looked at it as a stigma. And so I think the difference between the time period when I had served in that field, the stigma has decreased and more education has increased. Because I think depression was looked at so differently. I think even paranoid schizophrenia was looked at differently. And I just think as we continue to get older and the system gets older and more education is out there than it has been ever before, you're learning a lot about, you just have to accept people where they are. So, and I think that's the beauty of what's happening right now and why people it's not hard to say that I get depressed or I do have depression, because I think we look at it totally different because we're accepting people where they are right now. And that's the difference than the stigma and being comfortable. And I think the other thing too is I think for years we just never thought of how we should take care of ourselves. So I think that has become a huge priority also, because you can't take care of anybody if you're not taking care of yourself. So I think self-care has become a very big thing too, because we need it.
Yeah, and that's, Tony and I are big readers, and you read a lot of self-help books or whatever you want to call the genre. And that's basically something that people have been saying, like successful business people or, life coaches, whatever. All these people have been saying that for a really long time. And now I think we're actually, since we've gone through some pretty wild stuff in the last few years, people are actually starting to pay heed to that because they kind of realized how important it is with, the economy and the world kind of taking a wild turn. Maybe I need to take care of myself a little more and not just work all the time, and stuff like that. So that's really important. And especially with this field, I mean, there's so much going on with mental health. It's like that's basically what we're working on, teaching people to be independent and working. And it's not all, I mean, public perception, it's not all just taking care of people and holding hands all day. It's helping people become more willing to do stuff that they're uncomfortable with. So have you also seen changes in that over 24 years from like, we're here to simply take care of people to now we're pushing people to take care of themselves the best they can and assist otherwise?
I look at life as that if you're not doing something uncomfortable, then are we doing it right? Because we should be uncomfortable about certain things. And I think that, like I was saying, when I was talking about my sister, she was never not a traditional care person. And she was taught to be independent. And she worked independently. She stayed by herself in an apartment independently. Then it was her and my mom in the end. But she, pretty much everything we could do, she was capable of doing it too, because we ran straight natural supports with her. And, and I think it really gave her just a different type of edge where we just didn't feel like traditional services for her would work. And still to this day, it wouldn't work because she only went into, I think, the developmental disability system in Pennsylvania because it was a program we wanted to have her involved in. Gotcha. And you will not believe how old she was when she went into the programming. She was like about 66. So pretty much prior to that, she's living her life and still doing it now. So, I mean, she went in it as an older adult. It wasn't that she went in it young, no. And then, of course, I had a mother who was definitely a pioneer woman is what I would call her, because she said she will be bused to school. She will be educated, and she fought a school system and made sure it got done.
That's right. Well, kudos to how your family has created these avenues of independence. That's definitely what we strive for. Pat, for the last several years, I've had the pleasure of sitting in a lot of meetings with you. And I think most of these meetings that we sit in are productive. It's, integrating the way agencies are doing things and the way the county board are doing things. And we're gathering data and information. But one of the things that always has stuck out to me is the seminars that you've been going to on human trafficking. And it is something that I truly believe, I'm sure, is affecting our culture of individuals that we serve. If you add intellectual delay to someone who already has a possibility of being trafficked, because let's be real, traffickers are looking for opportunity. Can you elaborate more on some, like with the seminars and the education that you have gotten through the years?
I'll say 8 years ago, 2 former superintendents ago, I was asked to go to a coalition meeting. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know what it was. I said, okay, well, I'll go. And it happened to be the Lucas County Human Trafficking Coalition. And so after I went that first time, I've never stopped going. And I've been a part of that coalition now for 8 years. And so just a lot of things that we learned. And one thing with trafficking, when it comes to like our DD population, you have some similarities of regular population and DD population. We are one of the most vulnerable populations in the world. So that's one of the things where I was saying we have to really start kind of looking out for our folks. So I will say we got christened by fire with it, because I came back, decided to put a committee together, had our first meeting at 9:00. The first case was at 11.
Wow.
Which we were like, really are not ready for this. Yeah. But like I said, we really were christened by fire. So it let us know yes, our population, they do get targeted because they are the most vulnerable. And from there, it just was just learning and training and just educating myself and my training partner on what did we need to do to protect our population. Because the other thing that we noticed was that our population, if you think about it from past history on how our individuals used to look to how they look now, there's a huge difference. So they look like we do. So it's hard to separate them. So, of course, a trafficker loves our population because they get a social security check, they have a roof over their head, and you can use them like 45 to 50 times in a day. So there's a fluid amount of cash that is always moving with our population. But I just had an interest in it just because I was just thinking, who could do this stuff to people and what can I do to deter that, work with victims, and help them survive from it. So that's how I really got so involved with that. And like I said, we've done trainings for, I'll say, maybe half of our county boards throughout the state. We usually will do trainings at our agency so that they're at least aware of red flags that are happening. And when you're talking human trafficking, and I'm not sure if you two are aware of this, but it is $150 billion business.
Whoa, billion with a B, ladies and gentlemen. Goodness.
Yes, it's a lot of money. And then the U.S. really actually did not start really looking at it until we had the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, which went in place in the year of 2000. But just think this was going on all along. We just weren't looking at it as if it was something that our population ever could even be involved in. Like I said, until we got that first case, I was like, I just never thought about it. It was not on my mind. And a lot of times if a person is not educated, they really are not sure what they're looking at, and they're not sure if they should say something. Because there are differences, because one thing with trafficking, it is force, fraud, and coercion. And if it's not that, it really is sexual exploitation. So I think just even us as agencies throughout all of our county boards, we were looking at it as sexual exploitation. So we really weren't looking at were people being forced, coerced, and was it fraudulent by them where someone was making money from you by doing whatever those acts would be. But our first case, this young woman, when she explained it, I was just in awe that she was blindfolded, taken in a vehicle, serviced about 45 men, bought back. And to her, in her mind, it wasn't that she actually was having sex with anybody. When they asked her, when we took her to a shelter, she's like, I didn't have sex with people. What are you talking about? Oh, wow. So it was some interpreting that had to be done. And then our person who was there with her said, when was the last time that you were being choked? She said, like yesterday is when the incident had occurred. And then the other thing we picked up too is the actual, you have the trafficker, then you have a bottom. A bottom usually is a female. She's the one that grooms the actual victim, but the bottom was trying to get her Social Security. So there's that fluid money again. Right. So 45 times a day, fluid money of a Social Security, they always had a place for her to do services. So it just was the most interesting thing that we had ever seen. And it's just that she was just very forthright at telling us what had happened once she got the understanding of what happened. And it was a case where we did have to move her out of county, which would have been a better survival thing for her. And so what we did find out recently is she's doing extremely well. She has learned how to have very appropriate relationships. She got a boyfriend, she works, she has her own place. So she's doing well. So some of our victims that we have that are our individuals can't come out. But like I said, it is a very, very huge money-making business. And it's hard to fight. I will tell you that much when we get cases.
I'm sure. And this actually takes me into the mindset for other agencies. Like, are there any red flags? Because it's not like I'm sure most people are just walking up on a daily basis like, hey, can I vandalize your body for personal gain? There's like a strategic roadmap that people are doing to get these things. Can you give us any examples on like warning signs or red flags that parents or agencies or family members can look out for?
I think what you'll start seeing is a change in behavior. That's one of them. The other thing is that you may see, this is what we kind of picked up with our individuals, the behavior thing first. Then you're going to see 2 cell phones on a person, possibly, a change in clothing. Might be a change in their friendships and patterns. They might stop talking to their friends that they used to hang out with. They become more composed to themselves. And so that's why it's kind of hard to read. But like I said, if you're kind of paying attention to some of the things that starts happening, then you'll know that there's a little bit more to what meets the eye here. But like I said, normally most of your actual victims are going to always have 2 cell phones. One's talking to the trafficker, the other one's your business line. Some will actually have up to 3, depending on how savvy the person may be. Then, like I said, in dress is a little different. You might start seeing them wear different types of clothing, more makeup. Certain sexual things will become a little more explicit with them. They'll start acting out certain things. So there's a lot of oddities that start to occur with behavior. And if they're in school, they might stop going to school. They just don't go anymore. And they may be a student who may be a good student, and they just may stop going. Yeah, which is what could happen. Very tired because they're normally not sleeping because they work a lot at night. A lot of weight loss because they may not be being fed either. Because some pimps, the requirement is you either will work if you want to get fed. If you don't work, you're not going to get fed. You might get juice and toast. Possibly. That just depends on what they think. And I think the traffickers, it just depends. Some are a little bit different, some traffickers, because some of them, they look at that person as a commodity. So that might be your pimp that's a little bit milder mannered, but then you may have a gorilla pimp. They're the total opposite. They're very mean. They beat their victims. And some of the girls that we have had, the one that I had was one of my major concerns is she was heroin addicted. And so she didn't like shooting the heroin, but the trafficker would shoot it for her, or her bottom would. So, like I said, you just see a lot of different changes just in what their norm is. And so that's some of the red flags.
Now, are there, like, what kind of cities are we talking about? I mean, here in Toledo, we're a mid-sized city, so I'm sure things like this happen here, but I'm assuming it's probably in the bigger cities. Like they might come here, but they're trying to get their victims to go to a bigger city where, per square mile, you have a better financial opportunity. Is there any specific cities that stick out to you that might be, I don't want to say stay away from because I don't want to seclude a city, but where are the higher numbers of these kind of trafficking situations?
Well, Toledo is kind of considered an area where they do a pass through, and they do usually use a lot of, you have a lot of trafficking that does occur here. Okay. And part of the reason why it does is because anywhere where you got major thoroughfares, water, rail, highway, and airplanes. We have all of those. So in interstates, the Lord, 75 will take you anywhere. Right. So that's an issue when it comes to cities. But like Texas is a big one. You have a lot of activity that comes out of Los Angeles. So it's and anywhere where you have like big, huge events like the Super Bowl event. Oh, the FBI is always there because you get a lot of traffickers going there. So anytime when you have events like Super Bowl events, really big, any type of like sporting events that are actually political events, you're going to see a lot of trafficking that's going to be going on there. And they send the feds in from almost every state to go into wherever that is just to check. And that does occur there in those bigger cities. But Toledo is a smaller city, but we have like one of the best human trafficking gurus that is in this city because we do have a lot of trafficking here. And our FBI task force here is ranked number 4 in the country.
Oh, nice.
Because they have prosecuted more cases for human trafficking than any other group. And they're really nice to work with. I have 2 gentlemen that I work with quite a bit from the FBI task force. And they, one thing about when it comes to our actual population, it doesn't matter whether we think it's true or not. They take a case and they will prosecute a case because they're people with disabilities. So, and
that's good.
Yeah, because they did a actual training, which was done last year, and it was a sting that they had in Lima, Ohio. And that sting took them several years before they completed it. But once when they finished, they were saying that some of the girls, they were concerned because they knew they had some type of disabilities, but they didn't know if they were at the level of our DD population, but there were some learning disabilities that were there. And the majority of those traffickers, I think most of them went for 45 to life on their sentences.
Wow, that's what they deserve. Good job for the FBI task force. And I mean, people like yourself who are keeping this topic, on the forefront of our minds. So since we went over like all the horrific stories, let's say, because I do remember, I think in Columbus or Cincinnati, there was a situation where like 3 girls they escaped. I think somebody that they were very close to. I can't remember the exact story, but what happens after the escape? What happened? Like how does someone find help? Because it's got to be a lot of emotional trauma. It's got to be physical trauma. What's the next step for somebody who might be in this situation and just might hear this?
In most cases, because kind of what Steve and I do, we do a lot of consulting now. Mm-hmm. And so we do get calls from other places because I got a call on a case. It was like last year sometime, it might have been October. And they had called me on it because they weren't sure if there was some trafficking going on. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I immediately called the FBI just to take a look at it. So we did get the girl away from the situation. So once you get them away from the situation, hopefully that's where we start putting providers in place. And so something that the county board has that no other county board has throughout the whole entire United States is the PATH program. Mm-hmm. It's Partners Against the Trafficking of Humans. And that's ran by one of my provider support specialists, Jane Myers. And what she does is if we find out about a case, we will go in and she has like a actual assessment that's put together. And in that assessment, it deals with legal, if they're caught up in the legal system, housing. We look at emergency funds for them for apartment, down payments, possibly utility payments up front. So we try to start targeting them toward the services that they need. Mm-hmm. We look for trauma counselors to work with them because there is a difference between a counselor and a trauma counselor. Mm-hmm. So we usually try to involve trauma counselors with all of our actual victims. So this actual form will let you know where the risk factors are. And then we start bringing in some of the providers that we have at the coalition to support and assist them. And so they can work with them as holding them there for housing if we need housing somewhere for them until we can find a place for them full term. So once if we know about it, we start routing them through the system. And then some of the other things that we do too is we try to figure out where's that trafficker, is he going to come after her? So we need to put in some safety constraints to make sure that they're going to be safe. So a lot of times if we get a case that comes here, we may move it out of county if we think that the person really is going to be at risk, because it isn't like the one case that we had to bring in private security, which they were plainclothes police officers for the safety of the staff that were involved with that case, because the actual trafficker and the bottom, they were coming to our agency. Wow. They were coming to see if they could find her, because the thing is they do not like to lose the girls who make them a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So like I said, so we can move them, but we'll hold on to that case until a full transition is done with the other county. But what we try to do is a lot of linking. And one thing with the justice system, which they have started doing with the judges, which I really like this, because we have had Teresa Fetter, she is a phenomenal senator, and she has put so many things in place to protect our girls. And by her putting a lot of these protections in, it makes it neat because the judicial system is also involved too. So a lot of times they pick up a young girl and they get her on prostitution. The judges have kind of figured out, okay, now she's like 15. Really, was she prostituting, or she told she has to do this? So they figure out a way to kind of ask. Usually the girl will tell her backdrop story about, yes, I'm being forced to do this. So normally your trafficker is either going to send the bottom or herself to come and get her. What the judge does, he says, I'm putting her in jail. But he doesn't put her in jail. Runs her out the back door to a provider to get them to where they're safe to take care of all the needs that they have. So you have the judicial system working alongside now too, versus trying to jail a 15-year-old or a 12-year-old. Because I don't know what most girls were doing at 12. I know what I was doing at 12 was I was playing with Barbie. And I wasn't thinking of having sex with a whole bunch of men. So that did not cross my mind. But like I said, you have a lot of these girls and their histories are pretty rough. They've been sexually assaulted at about 3 and 4 years old. So that has been a repetitive history of sexual assault. So after a while, when a person continues to have to live a lifestyle like that, it becomes burned into their core. And that's what they think that they're worth, and that's what they'll do. And that's why it's so easy to get them hooked into trafficking, because of that pattern of behavior. And it's tough to get them out too. But, we work in every area that we can to make sure that they can trust us and that they're willing to let us help them and assist them and get them from point A to point B so they can start doing recovery. But it has to be done with a lot of therapy, a lot of trauma therapy, because a lot of that trauma has happened when they were very young too. So.
Goodness.
And PATHS is a program, actually, it comes out of the Human Trafficking Social Justice Institute at University of Toledo. But we are the only
Well, that's just mind-blowing. It's pretty rare to get me to not talk for a while. So that is like, wow, that's a lot to take in. And I think you raised some very important points, with one being a lot of people that would watch this, say if this was on the news and you had 10 seconds or 20 seconds to get your whole story across, and that's what you're saying, a lot of people, and I've heard this from people over time, is why don't they just stop? Why don't they just leave? And they don't understand that it's so much more complicated that, like, say you don't have any money, you're young, you don't understand how the world works, you just have people telling you that your whole life, this is what you're worth, too bad. Like, what are you going to do? Like, there's nowhere to run. Like,
it makes me think of, what do they call it? Munchausen syndrome.
Yeah.
And, victim persecution or something, like where the victim is sitting there and they feel bad that they got this person arrested. Mm-hmm. Like that's a whole new level to me of mental.
It's trauma bonding. They have a relationship. I love you. I'm doing this because I love you. And we all know everybody wants to be loved. Mm-hmm. So, and that's how a lot of our girls, that's the coercion piece. But that trauma bonding, I am telling you, it is so hard to get a girl without a disability out of that, let alone one with a disability out of that. It's very hard because it starts out as a very good relationship. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, will you do this for me? Mm-hmm. And can you do that for me? Well, why don't you start having sex with these men? Because I don't know if you know Teresa Flores, that's how hers started. And she was in bondage of trafficking for a very long time. She lived in Detroit. Her father was a very big gentleman in the auto industry. And she started dating a guy. And then the guy took nude pictures of him and her after school. And I'm going to tell your parents if you don't do this, this, and this. Or I'm going to kill your parents if you don't do this, this, and this. And so she told this story one time. So I had her come and train at our agency. And I'm still to this day, I just look at her because I couldn't understand why she said these words. She said, if I was in a courtroom to this day and I was testifying against them, if they told me to go with them, I would go.
Wow.
And I was numb. I went, even after all this time, she said, yes. She said, that's the type of fear that they put in you. And the control is just so strong. She said, that is something so hard to break. Mm-hmm. And it is. So, and that's when a good point. Oh, well, they should be able to get out. No, getting out is not that easy. And it's not. And I don't know if you guys are aware of the case, and this actually was in Ohio. The actual traffic victim, she killed her trafficker, and she did it at 15. Wow. And she went to prison.
You know, I do remember hearing about that.
Yes, and she just got out. I think it was in the early 2021. A lot of fighting to get her out because it was kind of a self-defense. Mm-hmm. I don't want another man to touch me. She was done. And she ended up killing him, and they were holding her for murder because at that, like I said, I think some other judges, now that there's so much more education on it, may not have gone that route. When you look at all the damage that had been done to her, she just really didn't feel she had any other choice but to kill him. Mm-hmm. And did she purposely try to kill him? I don't think that she did, but it happened. And she served quite a few years of time. But she finally ended up getting out of jail, and I had the pleasure of hearing her speak. And she said, you know, you get to a point where when you're done, you're done. And she was done. She wasn't going to do that anymore. She couldn't take it. She couldn't take the beatings. She couldn't take the men. She just had it. So, and that's that psychological thing. That's the toll that is there that they put on you. But yeah, it's very hard to get out.
Yeah, and I've heard stories, and the only analogy I can think of with how this could relate to people is, like I've heard stories of people working at places where the employer kind of treats them the same way, and they're scared. Like if their employer's telling them, "Hey, without us, or your employer, you don't have any money, you don't have any health care," and like you're talking like I think they were referring to like a trash removal companies or something they worked at, and the owner would give them out small loans, and they would build up over time, and then they would just essentially feel like they could never quit because they owe this guy money. Mm-hmm. And it's like that's the only thing I could understand that would relate what you're saying to like the average person, because it's like that on steroids. They're mentally manipulating you. And especially if you have a disability or something, and it would be much easier for them to manipulate you in that way. I mean, it's no different than a grown man who's like talking about how tough he is, and I work in this tough industry doing trash. His boss is doing the same thing to him as an adult, like using fear to keep them where they're at, because it's a very powerful tool. I mean, and the average person on Earth, that like this is a underground industry. This is an underground. Like most people are not dealing with this. So it's like I always feel like it's so hard to relate this to someone who's never had to even hear about it, let alone the rest, because it's just so far out of their like white picket fence day-to-day life that it's like, how could anybody let this happen to them?
Right.
Like you said, it's a very easy thing to do, especially at a young age. So is there any like, not that this is something I'd like Toledo to be known for. I mean, that sounds like it's a pretty prolific place for human trafficking. Is there any reasoning behind that? Like, is it because we're kind of like a centralized hub in the Midwest, or is it just unsuspicious?
I would think that they do it just like the fast food restaurants. They bring everything here and test it out on us first. So people are testing out trafficking. And I'm sure, like, even with 75, like, you know, Pat was saying, you know, we're in a nice Midwest hub that we can get to anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, really easy. So,
and it's centralized because you can't get anywhere you want to go once you get here. And sometimes it's a pass-through, too. You could be bringing some girls out of New York and bring them through driving and still get them where you want them to go. And you can. So, and I think that's why it's kind of, well, because another example, a girl, she just had come out of a sex ring. And so it's kind of a weird story. The judge court ordered her here to Toledo. I still to this day don't understand how that happened, but she had a trafficker within about maybe 5 minutes after she got here and had crossed the state lines and was in Michigan till the gentleman, John, said, I think there's something wrong, and he bought her back. But yeah, I mean, she gave the FBI one of the biggest runs for their money on that case. Wow. That they couldn't use her on the case because she just wasn't giving anybody up, and she planned on not doing that, and she did not. But she's very savvy about how to make money this way too. So like I said, that's how she got the trafficker that fast and was doing her thing, and that's what she was doing. But then, Paul, you said something about how manipulative a person can be a workforce. We have some of the labor trafficking here is just as bad too. And there was a gentleman who has trained us about how he actually was labor trafficked for 15 years. And I'm going, oh my gosh, how could someone be labor trafficked that long? But like you said, he owed the money. So he was holding it over him and his family's head. How they actually were saved on it is someone kept saying, why are these kids always at home? They're not leaving this place to go to school. And that's how they actually busted him. And they were like, he said, and that's how I became free, was because someone reported them for not sending the kids to school at this place where this man was and where they worked, and that's how they were busted on it. But other than that, he probably would have been there for maybe for 30 years. But yeah, so you have labor trafficking just as bad. So, because there's different parts of the actual trade of human trafficking. You have the sex and commercial, you have labor. Then you also have what they call now are servile marriages. And this is where maybe a 70-year-old man marries a little girl that's 6 or 7. So you just have all these different dynamics of sex trafficking that's there. You can have labor trafficking done in the hotel industries. You can have it done in the farming industry. So there's just a lot of ways that you have a whole lot of trafficking going on. Do we see it visually? Yes. Do we even understand that that's happening? No, because until I was very educated in it, I never would think about when we were going home to Pittsburgh and then thinking that they were trafficking girls there at a truck stop. I didn't think of that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm so bad. My family knows they hate to travel with me because when we go to a rest stop, of course, I'm looking to see if I see a nice Escalade or a van. I'm looking to see to make sure, because I'll report, because that's just me. And then my other end said, if I see a young girl with an older man, she's dressed too well, buying Prada purses, yeah, I'm reporting him too, because he's probably been a trafficker. So if I'm in a mall and I see something suspicious because I'm educated on it, yeah, I'm looking. I'm more visual now than I ever have been before. But prior to that, did I ever think about that stuff? No, did not.
If you're like me,
and I know a lot of times after we train, people walk up to us and said, one person explained this scenario. I live over on so-and-so and such and such. I keep seeing semis pulling up at this house. I'm just kind of concerned. I said, you have the address? So she gives me the address. I turned the address in. They were trafficking right off of 475.
Wow.
I turn people in.
Education people.
It's a habit. I will turn you in. I just don't have a fear of that. But like I said, if I didn't train, educate, or learn or train other people, you all wouldn't know either. Mm-hmm. But if it looks suspicious and your gut's telling you something's wrong, trust your gut, because there probably is something going on.
Good advice.
Yeah, that is just down a rabbit hole. Like I don't know what to say at this point. It's like so this isn't stuff you think about, like daily. Like you don't think about human trafficking. It's like a buzzword you hear, And then to imagine that someone wakes up every day and has this going on in their life, it just kind of makes you feel like, oh, like, how can this, like, in 2022, like, this is stuff you hear about, like, oh, back in the 40s, people were trafficking, oh, in the 20s. So why do you think that it's not more talked about on a national scale, on a public scale? Because this is like I said, a passing news story. This is something they'd put on the news for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and we'd go move on to the next murder or whatever you want to talk about, and then start talking about the. Why do you think that we're not talking about this? As you're saying, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. That's like more than, like, we're talking like
Bezos type
like
cash.
Amazon level of money trading hands. Why are we not talking about this?
I think part of it is that sex is taboo. Let's be honest.
Correct. Yeah.
People don't talk about it. The other thing is that $150 billion business does not get there on its own. Yeah. So people who used to sell drugs, you sell a drug once. That's it. You can sell a girl more than once. Mm-hmm. Then you take a look at even like the labor piece. I can get more work done out of a person without paying them or, cheating them out of their money. So why not do that? And then the other thing too is who's involved. That's really the tough part, because when you have a judge, this was said by a judge, and a young girl, it was when they had Backpage before the government, the federal government shut it down. He said, well, what's wrong with the 12-year-old wearing a thong and in her bra being put on these sites? Whoa. And I was like, lost my composure. I'm sitting there watching this movie. Right. And when he said that, I was like so furious. I had to get up and go get some air, because I was like, did he seriously say that? And judges are buyers. Lawyers are buyers. They had 2 up in Michigan, 2 lawyers. They're supposed to be helping the girls. They were selling the girls. So it is who's actually involved. You have political people that are involved. You have priests that are involved. You have a multitude of people that are involved. So when you have money that's of that magnitude, it goes above and beyond sometimes, which is out of our reach, is what I would say. Mm-hmm. And so to talk about it's okay, but are we willing to stop it? I'll fight to stop it, but will everybody else? And like I said, if you're not educated about it, you won't know what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. You really wouldn't. So it's like even some of the sexual assault scandals, like with the girls with the gymnast for the Olympics, they had to know that was happening, but who wanted to bring it to the forefront? You're right. It's very bold moves when you're willing to bring it to the forefront. And like I said, it has its dangers behind it too. It could be dangerous, and it can, depending on how that trafficker may think, or if you're taking away their money, because an escort alone is about like $10,000 a night, $10,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. So if she's there for the whole night, and she's only 5 times in a week, you're talking about $50,000. And then some actual traffickers, they're making 6 figures, between $250,000 to $500,000. That's in a week.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
a lot of money. And I think it's because it is so much money, and the people that are behind it, it's just very hard to stop. And it really is, because you wouldn't have it if you didn't have buyers.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't.
It's like
it
the
wouldn't
war on
exist
drugs.
without buyers. Yeah, and if you have buyers, it's going to always be here. Mm-hmm. And like I said, and I think it's just that conversation about sex itself. And, me as a family member, and, when it comes to our population, technically, really, do we really ever know whether our individuals are having sex or not, too?
That is a very good point.
Yes. And like I said, we were one of those families that we just never thought about that with our sister. And me and my middle sister were talking one day, and I said, I wonder, if she ever did. And we both looked at each other with this look on our face and said, well, I'm not asking. And the other one, I'm not asking either. We might have been told something we didn't want to hear, or said, excuse me, you're in our business, so you need to get out of my business. So, I mean, we were just one of those families that just never thought about that, you know. And a lot of times with our DD population, whether it's the kind of the newer generation or not, we just really don't think about that stuff. And you know, like I said, it's a bold move to ask. So it makes it very difficult, and it does. But yeah, just think the other thing too is it definitely is really a lack of education about it, and people who really want to hear it and really understand that it is one of like the most horrific crimes that you could ever do to a person is sexually assault them. Because when I look at trafficking, to me, every time that those young women or men or any of them are touched, it's rape. And I will always stick with that. It is rape because they are being told they have to do it. They're being coerced to do it, and it's rape. And so, and it's just our society is just, I don't think is really there yet. They're getting there because we're putting laws in place, but it's been a fight to get those laws in place too. It really has.
Well, I've noticed that I think a lot of people now with the age of the internet and, you know, everybody can put out a show or whatever they want or talk about whatever they want. I feel like there's a lot of outrage being spent, which takes a lot of emotional like power to do. And I think a lot of people nowadays, since there's so much information available at all the times and everybody can put out as much information as they want, are really losing focus on things that should be important, like this, when they're getting upset about things that maybe are not as important. Like, not to say mental health and like all these topics that are continuously being talked about now on the new social media, which is like, what is it? I don't even know the generational names anymore. Gen Y, Z, like younger kids, like they're all talking. They're all coming up in like, I didn't have social media when I was like a teenager really until I was a little bit like older. And a lot of this is everybody has a camera, a cell phone, a platform, a TikTok where they can say things. And when you're 14 and you're upset that your guy that you like in class doesn't want to talk to you, you're putting all this emotional power out there and people are watching it. Like millions of people could watch that. And there's a tension on what's like pulling at heartstrings. Nobody wants to hear the truth about sex trafficking or the DD field. Like, it's so hard to disseminate a message about like things that are affecting people in a severely negative way, like human sex trafficking.
Yeah.
I mean, it is ruining people's entire lives.
A real quick disclaimer. This, I mean, I know we primarily have been speaking on females, but this can be a male scenario. This can be transgender. Like all of these different scenarios can be affected. So don't just think I have a precious little girl. Like this is, and which is funny is that's where my mind went at first. I have a 11-year-old daughter. And she's gorgeous, and she's in gymnastics, and the whole gymnastic thing just put me on high alert, you know. And then the fact that she's getting older, you know, cell phones and stuff are becoming a way of life, and even utilizing games and stuff on computers. They have all these chat screens, and going back to what we said earlier, people, especially if you're an adult trying to do this, they realize that they're talking to a kid. So they're not just going to come out and say, "Hey, go sell yourself for me." It's meticulous, and it takes time to build that relationship and trust. So yeah, it needs to be talked about more. The laws need to be strict. You know, I wish Chris Hansen can come back on and get some of these Catching Predators and stuff. I used to love that show.
But
and like you said, and the other thing with kids, because we have like trainers that are at the coalition, and I will never forget one of the grandfathers was on, and he said, "Now I take my granddaughters with us, and we go on a trip together." He has 2 granddaughters, him and his wife, and then we're on it. And the daughter came and she said, Papa, I think you need to take a look at this on my tablet. He looked at it and said, oh, no, we need to shut the tablet off.
It probably was.
Because it creeps in on the tablet. And so he was like, he called his son and said, I think me and you and your wife need to have a little conversation about these tablets and the use of them and putting some parental controls on them. Because even my grandson, he's just turned 12, and he knows exactly what I do when it comes to trafficking. And it was so funny one day, this guy started asking him some questions through Fortnite. And I'm like, Fortnite's supposed to be just so innocent. But I'm like, well, I guess it's not. So he asked him how old was he, what was his name, where did he live? And so he was smart enough when he asked him what was his name. He said, my name is 911.
You tell him.
He said, well, where do you live? He said, grandmother trains and anti-human trafficking. Anything else you need to know? And the guy got off very quickly. But most kids don't know that. And we did say, don't ask for a camera because you're not getting one. That's not going to work. We screen things. I look at everything. So it's attached to Papa's phone to review his phone. So, and I mean, you have to do that because they just come in from just all over the place. And then, you have the dark web, and people thought the dark web was bad, but, you got the dark web, which is even a little bit deeper. And so, and they do have like NECMEC, which is like, it deals with exploited children. It's a national federal organization. They do have actual staff. They sit there and they monitor kids' computers. And they can tell if they're going to get a hit from someone who they're concerned about. They start monitoring that. And they look. So if something just doesn't look right, they pick it up and they start monitoring those people. So thank God that safeguard's there, but still, you do have to look at what your kids are doing. Because a cell phone, it can be a beautiful thing, but in this day and age, it could be very dangerous, and it can be. Because you can have whoever it is show up at your door, because I had to have a conversation with a friend's daughter in reference to that, and I'm like, be careful who she's talking to because you don't know how old that person is. And that person will say, well, I'm going to meet you at the corner, and that might be the last time you see her. So there's just all these things you have to just be so careful with it. And my nephew, he was telling us, he said, switch to iPhones. Then they have to come and ask you for codes to get into certain sites because you have them locked up. They can't get on. But it's just, it's there, and they're out there. And it's almost like I swear they know who to go after, which is kind of strange, even through the computer system. They'll know who's going to give them information or not. That's how savvy that they are, because they are, or they send a female. And, and a female, to me, when she's dealing with a trafficker, she has a history. Her history's there, too. There's been some exploitation going on in her life. Which is why she's very comfortable doing what she's doing. And then, of course, I always have a concern about why traffickers think the way they think. And, of course, I asked the FBI task force, the two guys I work with, I said, would I be able to talk to a trafficker? They both looked at me and said, no.
This is heavy.
Yeah, this is a heavy topic.
This may be one of the heaviest podcasts we've done, and that's a good thing because it gets you thinking about all these conversations, but I don't think it can be truly considered a full Friends for Life podcast without a little game show we like to call
Rapid Fire. If you are not familiar, Rapid Fire is part of the show in which we ask a would you rather scenario, 3 questions. Or did I even say that right? 3 questions in a would you rather scenario.
We've done like 50 of these. He's never once done it right.
Never. I can't talk. I don't know what that's all about. But answer them as quick as you can. I want the first answer that comes to your head. Most people make me rethink these, and I have to go and make detailed ones. So, but these are pretty fun and simple. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. First one. Would you rather meet the president or your favorite actor?
Favorite actor.
And who is that by chance?
I have a few.
You strike me as a Denzel type. I
He'd be
love me
on
some
my
Denzel.
list.
King Kong ain't no. Let me. Okay, would you rather?
I would
eat
say
spaghetti?
Idris Elba. He would be someone I would like.
Idris. He's got that thing where he can change his voice up. He can keep his regular. Look, Paul has no idea what we're talking about.
I'm sorry.
I'll show you.
He's a nice British brogue.
Mm-hmm. He might be the next 007. Look at me. I'm the one going off topic now.
Somebody's got a man crush.
Yeah, man. Can I? Okay. Would you rather eat spaghetti through a straw or have a spaghetti smoothie?
Movie, I guess.
That'll be so horrible. And lastly, would you rather have 5 anonymous Valentine's Day cards or receive one and know who it came from?
Want to know who it came from.
That's, big hearts. With Valentine's Day coming up, hopefully there are people out here doing what they're supposed to do.
Thanks for reminding me.
Hey, you're welcome. Just in case I forget.
Hopefully it comes from my husband, who I've been married to. We will be going on 41 years this year.
41. Congratulations.
That is impressive.
Yes.
Great work there.
Yeah.
We are our internet is freezing up here. We're losing connection. So on that, before we wrap up here, Pat, I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can learn more about human trafficking. If you do have like a website or any information that they could look up online, and any closing sentiments that you have that you think is important for people to know about human trafficking, the DD field, whichever.
Okay, well, one thing with human trafficking, we always have a call to action. And it's like, if you see things, report them, get as much education as you can. And I will have to push the one website, which is called Polaris. Polaris gives you all the data that you need, any questions that you want to have answered. All that information is on there. And if you have opportunities to go to trainings, please go to those. And one training I always push every year, and that is the Human Trafficking Social Justice Conference, which is done at UT in September. You have people coming from all over the world to that conference, and they address a lot of social justice and human trafficking issues. And please don't forget about our males. They get trafficked too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Friends for Life podcast. And
yes, thank you.
I feel like there's enough here. We could do another 15 episodes. So
easily. This could be a reoccurring segment, honestly. But thank you so much.
I didn't get organ harvesting. I didn't do that one yet. And that one's very interesting too.
So we'll stay tuned and be at you in the future.
All righty.